Have you ever imagined what it would be like if you were just enjoying a relaxing evening of fishing with a buddy of yours down by the river, thinking everything's fine, everything's good, and then BAM! Out of nowhere, you're getting grabbed by alien robots who have crab claws for hands? You might even be screaming, "No, no, no." But the alien robots won't let go. Because they're super strong, and they don't speak English. I don't know if you've ever imagined that scenario before, but what I do know is two good old boys down at Pascagoula sure as hell never had to. Welcome back to the return of Super Mystery Bros, the podcast that holds up a mirror to the most diabolical mysteries in the world. My name's Nate, and back with me again is Kyle. Kyle, what it is, brother man?
It is what it is, brother man. It's good to be back. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time since our last podcast, so I've got some things I want to say up front. So Davis, our producer, he made the decision to leave this world for good earlier this year. And as you can tell, I'm kind of dancing around my words here a little bit because of the algorithm. I just want you all to know that we're all devastated here about it. He actually left behind a note which explained his reasons. Do you know what the main one was, Kyle?
I do not. Why don't you enlighten us?
So he said that he was leaving this world for good because nobody was leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts for all of his hard work.
Wow, that's rough.
Yeah. So it's a sad story, but we're going to continue on with the show because I think he would have wanted it that way. Next, today was my last day of wage slavery at my wagey job of 12 years. So congratulations to me for finally being free of wage slavery, at least temporarily.
Congratulations, Nate.
Feels pretty good, man. Next, as an FYI, general FYI to our listeners, this episode was supposed to have been an Ivan episode. But I'm not really sure what's going on because he keeps kicking the can down the road over and over. So I decided to just bring Kyle on board on short notice. And what do you know? Kyle agreed. So yeah, thanks, Kyle. You're an absolute madman. Actually, you're an absolute Minuteman. But when it comes to fighting aliens, not the British.
Yeah, more like a last minute man. You give me a call. Hey, Kyle, can you help me fight aliens tonight? Yeah, man, I'll be right there.
Yeah. All right, man, so what are we going to be talking about, speaking of aliens?
Tonight, we'll be talking about another famous alien abduction. I'll be honest, I forget the name of the city in Mississippi.
Pascagoula.
Pascagoula alien abduction.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on top of it tonight. Yeah. So some say this is the...
Embarrassing.
Some call this the second most famous close encounter alien abduction, second only to the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, which we previously covered.
Well, me and Ivan did.
Well, we the Super Mystery Bros.
Yeah, okay, all right. That makes sense. All right, so right before we begin, I'd like to just give a quick shout out to tonight's sources, which include two articles written on singularfortean.com by Tobias Wayland, the Clarion Ledger, Joe Nickel of the Skeptical Inquirer, the Washington Post, and last but not least, a great article on countryroadsmagazine.com written by Alexandra Kenan Shaheen. All links can be found in the episode description. All right, Kyle, are you ready to get started on this one?
I'm ready when you are, Nate.
Have you ever had one of those days where you wish you had just stayed in bed? It happens to all of us. Sometimes we get up out of bed in the morning with the best of intentions, but by nightfall, we regret ever waking up that day. Perhaps you once wrecked your car and got a DUI because you chose to down pitchers of Bud Light at the bowling alley instead of staying home to play Monopoly with your loved ones. Maybe you decided to do the right thing and eat a salad for lunch, only for it to make you explode out of both ends for the next week and a half. Or perhaps, maybe you decided to go all in on some dumbass animal shitcoin right before it got rug pulled. It's like that famous scene from GoldenEye. Half of everything is luck, and the other half, fate. It's here, at the intersection of Shit Luck Drive and Fate Boulevard, where life pelts its unsuspecting victims with its weirdest curveballs, like some shitty little kid throwing rocks at cars from behind some bushes for fun. Which begs the question, could you be next? Stay tuned to find out.
We begin our story in the small coastal southeastern Mississippi town of Pascagoula, nestled on the shore of the Gulf formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico. A quaint, quiet little place where, if you were driving through it, you might miss it if you dozed off for about 20 minutes. Known for nothing if not its U.S. Navy shipyards, Pascagoula is one of those places where the folks work hard, play hard, and are always willing to lend a hand. It's a place where you could step into a greasy old diner and have a beer with a friendly blue-collar guy in a trucker hat named Dale, and where the word stranger doesn't even exist in the local lexicon. It's a place where folks from all walks of life flock to get a taste of Americana in its purest, most concentrated form. Folks from all over the world, and dare I say, perhaps, even the universe. For more information, let's step into the time machine as we go back, way back, to the year 1973.
The year was 1973. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon had just dropped, and dope smokers the world over were all shouting in unison, "Far out, man!" And yet, the salt of the earth folks down in Pascagoula, Mississippi were none the wiser, as they were too busy drinking whiskey and cranking Lynyrd Skynyrd as the good man upstairs intended. In fact, Freebird was not just a song to the folks down in Pascagoula, but a way of life and an entire philosophy for living. Freebird was, and still is to this day, the only socially acceptable word you could randomly scream out the window of your truck at 60 miles an hour without coming across as a complete lunatic. But as the scorching hot Dixie summer of 1973 began to slowly wane into autumn, the otherwise perfect year of 1973 would soon turn into nothing short of an absolute nightmare for two good old boys just trying to do some fishing down by the Pascagoula River. Kyle, why don't you set the scene for us?
It was October 11th, 1973. As the early autumn sun dipped toward the western Mississippi horizon, a brilliant, shimmering orange glow was cast over the muddy waters of the Pascagoula River. Two coworkers, Charles Hickson, 42 years old, and Calvin Parker Jr., 19, had finished their shift at the nearby F.B. Walker & Sons shipyard, and for the young Calvin, it happened to be his first day on the job, where the much older and wiser Charles served as his foreman. Charles was a man's man, a hard-rockin', whiskey-drinking man with a Norwood 7 hairline so blindingly reflective that, according to legend, started at least 2 brush fires in the Jackson County area after the summer sun hit it at an unfortunate angle. He was also a Korean War veteran and was said to be the type of guy who would give the shirt off his back for anyone, a smile that could light up a room, and was considered by all to be a pillar of the community. Calvin was a bright, naive young man who was just starting out in life. At this point, he had his entire life ahead of him, and still had a full head of hair. He was getting married in just a month, and dreamed of starting a career, marrying his fiancée, and starting a family of his own.
According to their account, after a hard day's work, the two headed out toward the nearby shore of the Pascagoula River for a relaxing evening of sober fishing, a rather unusual, and some would say, masochistic twist on a sacred southern pastime. In modern terms, this is what we would now consider to be raw dogging. Initially, they tried casting out near the banks of the river, but decided to pack it up and relocate once frantic swarms of moths began dive-bombing the back of Charles' head as it glistened and glowed under the nearby floodlights. Charles, mildly annoyed, grumbled and muttered something about this happening all the time and suggested that the two head over to a darker area back inside the shipyard, which contained a small, dilapidated pier with the sign that said no trespassing. Calvin, innocent as he was, and bless his heart for it, voiced his concern over the sign, to which Charles quipped back, quote, "That don't mean nothing. I fish here all the time," end quote. But little did they know, them two boys wouldn't be the only ones fixing to catch something there that night.
The two walked out onto the old pier and cast out their lines, this time free from any strong external light sources. The sight proved to be most tranquil, as the gentle sloshing of the river and the omnipresent echoing of frogs and crickets dominated the evening ambiance. The two remained quiet for the most part, aside from the subject of Freebird, which they both agreed was a pretty good song. With no Budweiser to sip on and nothing much to think about, Calvin's mind began to wander. He spotted a steel rowboat on the other side of the river and pondered to himself how something made out of steel could float. "Man, get a load of that rowboat, man," he thought to himself. "What a time to be alive." It was just a moment later that Calvin noticed a hazy blue glow shining across the surface of the Pascagoula River, accompanied by a strange hissing sound coming from behind them. Time seemed to slow as his mind immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Johnny Law was coming to haul their asses off to jail for trespassing. "Charlie, we're in trouble. You lied to me, and we're fixing to go to jail," Calvin blurted out. But as he turned around to face the police, he was shocked and horrified by what he saw.
"Well, looks like them Pascagoula boys done found themselves in a heap of trouble. But it ain't the sheriff they gotta worry about. Stick around, 'cause this here's about to get real weird."
Today's episode has been rudely interrupted by hymns. Are you a man over 30? Is your fear of looking like Charles Hickson by age 42 debilitating and getting in the way of your happiness? Is your scalp so shiny that folks around town call you Mr. Death Star because you set homes on fire every time you walk outside at noon without a hat on? The truth is, you stand a 2 out of 3 chance of being completely bald by age 35 unless you panic buy some knockoff Propecia from Hims right now. Worried about side effects like erectile dysfunction? Don't be. They sell a pill for that too. Gone are the days when you had to choose between luscious hair and a rock-hard, throbbing erection. Hims offers pills for both hair loss and ED. Does the thought of basic human interaction give you crippling anxiety? With Hims, you can connect with a doctor over the internet, and if approved, your hair and/or dick pills are shipped directly to your door. Act now to take the first step toward delaying the inevitable. Try Hims today by visiting forhims.com/somebitch. That's forhims.com/somebitch. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. It wasn't Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane fixing to come throw him in the slammer, and it sure as hell wasn't any kind of police cruiser either of them two boys had ever seen. What stood before him was a 30 to 40 foot long, 8 to 10 feet tall, oval or football-shaped craft that was hovering about a foot off the ground, just a few yards in front of them. So close, in fact, that it filled their entire field of vision. Charles told the Gadsden Times newspaper, quote, "I turned around and there was some sort of craft hovering about a foot off the ground. It had flashing blue lights like a police car. A door opened, and there was a bright light coming from inside," end quote. Shock and surprise turned into utter terror as 3 strange beings emerged from the craft and were coming straight toward him. Quote, "I couldn't move. I don't know if it's because I was so frightened or what," Charles later said. The beings floated with their legs together about a foot off the ground. They were bulky, with crab-like claws for hands, no necks, and gray, wrinkled, elephant-like skin, slits for eyes and mouths, and where their nose and ears should be were instead sharp, pointy, cone-shaped protrusions. Wow, okay, so we're looking at a picture, an artist's rendition of one of the aliens. How would you describe this to our listeners?
Definitely not your typical gray alien image, 6 foot tall, so not short.
So real quick, while on that note, I've heard Charles describe the aliens as about 5'2", and then in other accounts I've heard up to 6 feet. So I'm not sure what the truth is, because I've heard both about 5 feet and I've heard 6 feet as well. So I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy there. But anyway, somewhere
Yeah.
between 5 and 6 feet tall.
Yeah, but other than that, humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, torso, head on top. The head definitely has some weird cone-shaped protrusions coming out of it where, like
They
you
look
said...
like thick antennas, like short, stubby antennas coming out of the head.
Yeah, but they're pointed parallel with the ground, which is not normally the direction you would have antenna pointing.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then their hands are just basically like a crab claw or something.
Yeah. And I know that the description they gave said wrinkly. This depiction doesn't really show wrinkly, but I've seen a couple other drawings. It kind of look like the old, I don't know, like swamp creatures almost, where their skin almost looks like it's melting a little bit and it's coming off, like they have fat rolls going all the way down their body.
Yeah, wrinkly elephant-like skin. So anyway, Kyle, why don't we move on with the story?
The beings outstretched their arms towards the men, and in response, the 2 men's arms also raised up involuntarily toward the beings, as if going in for a hug. Unfortunately for the men, the beings wanted more from the men than just a hug. 2 of them grabbed Charles, while the remaining one grabbed Calvin, and floated them both aboard the craft. Once at the door of the craft, Calvin described being injected with a quote-unquote go-to-hell shot. His words, not ours. Which replaced his overwhelming fear with a strange, peaceful numbness, which left him feeling eerily unbothered by the situation. Calvin was brought down a hallway into a room and placed onto an examination table that was made of glass. Then, the creature who led him there left the room, and a square-shaped object descended from the ceiling. Calvin described it as being about the size of a deck of cards, which circled around him and made a series of clicking noises before it ascended back up into the ceiling.
Fucking weird, man. Next, a new being entered the room, this time one that looked like a human female, except with really long middle fingers. He later told Alexandra Shaheen for Country Roads magazine that, quote, she was normal. Matter of fact, if I'd been in a bar room drinking or something and was single, at this time, I'd probably asked her out on a date, end quote. Then, the unthinkable happened. The attractive female alien grabbed him by his jaw, forced it open, and, for seemingly no reason, jammed her fingers down his throat, which caused him to gag and start bleeding. Then, it let out a deep groan, which Calvin describes as sounding like an alligator's mating call. It was right after this moment that the original creature came back into the room and escorted him back off the ship and onto the bank of the river.
Charles reported a very similar experience, being escorted onto the ship, which he described as having an ambient light emitting from everywhere. The floors, the ceiling, the walls, etc. Being led into an examination room and a football or eye-shaped probe that emerged from the wall and circled around him. As Charles was escorted off the ship, he found Calvin already standing at the river's edge, with his arms outstretched in front of him as if in a trance or sleepwalking. The 2 were panic-stricken and unsure of what they should do. Should they report it to the authorities? If they did, they reckoned they'd become the laughingstock of Jackson County. Charles' immediate instinct was to keep it to himself and to encourage Calvin to do the same. However, after walking back to his car, which now inexplicably had a shattered driver's side window, mind you, Charles started hitting the liquor bottle he had stashed underneath the driver's seat to calm his nerves. After swigging down some liquid courage, Charles had a change of heart and decided they needed to report it.
Wow. Okay, Kyle, can you just kind of give a quick recap of the story so far for our listeners?
All right. So, Charles and Calvin are fishing down on the dock.
Down by the river.
Down by the river after work. Sober, which is strange for Southerners to be fishing sober after work.
Strange for anyone to be fishing sober.
Yeah, it's in my opinion a pretty boring thing to do.
That's like a Zen
sober.
exercise.
Yeah. Charles and Calvin fishing down by the river, and they see lights behind them. They think it's the cops. Turn around, it's a UFO. 3 odd-shaped aliens come waltzing out, put them into a trance, take them aboard the craft, do some physical inspection on them, and then just let them back out onto the dock where they picked them up, and the UFO flies off. Now these dudes are not sure what to do. Keep it to themselves is the original thought, and then after a little whiskey, they think, no, we should probably share our story.
Yeah, and then that's where we're at in our story so far. So the first authority Charles called was Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, but they turned him away, stating that the Air Force was no longer interested in reports of UFOs, and instead directed him to get in contact with local law enforcement. So the two decided to drive on over to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. Once there, the deputies initially suspected that the two men were just drunk. Then Captain Glenn Ryder admitted that he initially laughed at the report and didn't take them seriously. So much so that he strategically decided to leave them alone in a room together while a hidden tape recorder recorded their every word. The following is a partial transcript of their private conversation, which we're going to read because the original recording sounds like it was recorded on a potato. So, Kyle, who do you want to be in this transcript? Are you more spiritually aligned with Charles or Calvin?
I'm thinking Calvin.
Calvin, the younger guy?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you'll be Parker. I'll be Hickson.
I know. You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it.
Yeah, you hear about it. I know, yeah, I know.
Reckon it's something with the United States right there?
No, it couldn't be.
They wouldn't have done it.
Not what I've seen. No, not what you've seen. They did something, and the Air Force and all know it's up there too, see? And this ain't gonna be the only thing, and it's gonna happen again.
Hey, I sure as enough had a heart attack, and I ain't chicken.
I know. It scared me to death too, son.
I'm just damn near crying right now. I can't.
I know, but this is something that I think you can't get over in a lifetime, see? Jesus Christ, have mercy.
What's so damn bad about it is nobody believes that.
I just thought I'd been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go through something like this, see? But they coulda, they coulda harmed us, son. They had us. They coulda done anything to us, but they didn't hurt me.
Reckon why they just picked us, though?
I don't know. I'm telling you, man. I can't take much more of that.
I gotta get home and get to bed and get some nervous pills or something. See the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go all to pieces.
I was thinking about it, and when we get through this, we'll go up by there and I'll get you something to settle you down and so you can get you some damn sleep.
I can't sleep tonight like it is. I'm just damn near crazy.
But yeah, when they brought you out of that damn thing and when they brought me out, it felt like I'd been to hell, And god damn it, I like to never in the hell got you straightened out, man.
I had my arms, or I don't know, my arms was just froze out, just like that, and I couldn't move. Just like I'd stepped on a damn rattlesnake.
They didn't do me that way, though. Oh Lord, have mercy.
I passed out. I passed out. And that's the fastest I've ever passed out in my life. Set the new medical records and did.
I never seen nothing like that before in my life. But son, you can't make people believe that though.
And I don't if they believe it or not, 'cause I know it.
But they better wake up and start believing.
You're damn right.
They better wake up and start believing.
You're damn right. Listen, I seen it.
Better wake up and start believing.
I can't figure out the damn door. You see how that door come out on that?
Yeah, I don't know how it opened, son. I don't know.
I didn't see no door swing open.
I don't know how it opened.
We look around and it come down blue lights and them some bitches is just like that. They come out.
Yeah, I know. You can't believe it, and you can't make people believe it.
I paralyzed right there. I couldn't move.
They're gonna believe it one of these days. Might be too late. I knew all along there was people from outer worlds up there. I knew all along. End of transcript. So Kyle, what did you think about that?
I'm glad I picked Parker. He had much shorter parts.
Yeah. So what did you think about that? What are your impressions of that transcript?
That these guys are not playing the cops, right? The police put this secret tape recorder in there to see if, this is all just a hoax and when they think they're alone. But no, these guys are in shock. They had a real terrifying experience that they panicked about, and they're still scared shitless.
Yeah, it definitely does not suggest that they're lying about it. I mean, unless they're really good actors, right? But just based on the transcript, and if you actually listen to the tape, they do sound pretty fucking freaked out. I don't want to play a clip on it because the audio quality is just horrendous. But yeah, in my opinion, this sounds like two guys who either went through this or believed that they did. So, Kyle, why don't you continue on with the story?
Will do. The sheriffs were at a loss. The trap they had laid out didn't work and instead did nothing but reinforce the men's stories. Sheriff Ryder of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office had this to say, quote, "Me and the other investigator got up and left to let them talk, to see if they were going to say, well, we got them fooled, but they didn't," Ryder said. "They were really concerned," end quote. The two men went on to later take polygraph tests and passed. Quote, "I don't know what happened to them," Ryder said. "I wasn't there with them, but I know you don't fake fear, and they were fearful. They were fearful," end quote.
By the next day, the press had caught wind of the story, and it was plastered all across the front pages of local newspapers in the Jackson County area. The immediate aftermath of the story was nothing less than a local shitstorm, as local residents began to go as far as to even cover up their own windows in aluminum foil to prevent alien abductions. Local authorities were on the receiving end of an influx of hundreds of reports of UFO sightings, and the area had descended into ET mania. In Mobile, Alabama, for example, a psychic predicted the appearance of a UFO, an event that was covered by local TV news stations. About 1,000 cars showed up to witness the event, where the aliens subsequently pulled a no-show. I would be pissed.
Oh yeah. Regarding the men's openness to the experience, Charles Hickson was the more forthcoming of the two men and was always willing to tell his story to anyone who would listen. His take on the beings he encountered was that they were some kind of alien robots. He went on talk shows, did interviews, gave lectures, and even co-authored a book in the early 1980s. However, he seemingly was not coping well with what had happened, and in January of 1974, he was picked up by the police for public drunkenness after being found wandering along U.S. Highway 90, not far from where the incident had occurred. He went on to claim 3 more encounters with extraterrestrials in 1974 and said that the beings were peaceful. Charles spent the later years of his life mostly down on his luck, with Calvin even sometimes having to pay his electricity bill for him. In September of 2011, Charles suffered a massive heart attack, which rendered his body unable to be alive anymore. He was just 80 years old.
Wow. In 2018, 2 new witnesses came forward and spoke up about having allegedly seen the UFO land on the night in question. Maria and Jerry Blair, who were from Theodore, Alabama, were in Pascagoula on the night of October 11th, 1973, and according to their account, they were sitting in their 1969 Pontiac GTO in a parking lot on the opposite side of the river. Jerry worked for a seafood company and was waiting for a boat to come back and pick him up to take him offshore. It was during this time that Maria spotted a strange light. Kyle, keeping with the family tradition, do you want to describe what a 1969 Pontiac GTO looks like?
I don't feel like I ever really do a good job of describing what vehicles look like, but if you know anything about cars, you know what a fucking 69 GTO looks like. And
come on, man.
If you don't know what a GTO looks like, a 69 Pontiac GTO, you probably wouldn't care what I said the car looks like. But it's your classic American muscle car, 2-door, huge hood, huge trunk, big V8 under the hood, rumbly muscle car. Just another iconic muscle car of the American late 60s, early 70s. You know, looks a lot like a like a 69 Charger.
Come on, man. This is not a laughing matter. This is serious, okay?
This is
so
serious.
Anyway, back to the story. Maria told the Clarion Ledger, quote, "I was looking at the sky and I noticed a blue light in the sky over where they were fishing. It started moving and it seemed like it was following along the Pascagoula River. I just seen the lights on it. It was just going back and forth. Sometimes it would just sit there. It went on for 20 to 25 minutes, end quote. Jerry, on the other hand, initially believed the craft was a helicopter. Quote, "I thought it was a helicopter initially and just blew it off. It landed about 150 to 200 yards from us. I was just north of the bridge and it was just south of the bridge. I was there, but stupid me didn't pay much attention to it. I was just going offshore and thinking about other things," end quote. So this craft is 150 to 200 yards from these people, and this guy thinks it's a helicopter. I don't know if anyone's been near a helicopter that close before, but that shit is so fucking loud. there is no way that you would mistake a UFO for a helicopter or vice versa, especially if you're that close, in my opinion, because a helicopter is loud as hell.
Yeah, maybe their 69 GTO had really good soundproofing for the time.
Maybe they were just like revving the engine. They're just redlining the engine because they're bored, sitting in the parking lot.
Just that loud big block V8. Yeah,
just doing donuts in the parking lot while they're waiting for their ride offshore.
That's about what you would have to be doing in your vehicle to not hear the blades of a helicopter at 200 yards from you.
Yeah. Call me cynical, but I don't know if I buy that. That just sounds ridiculous to me that you would just think that's a helicopter and it's making no sound. Anyway, back to the story. Eventually, the boat came and picked Jerry up, and while the two were walking down the pier, Maria saw something in the water which startled her. Quote, "We heard this loud thumping splash in the river. I looked over the side of the pier, and that's when I thought I saw a person in the river. I was looking right down on it. It looked like a person, and there was something different about it. It only came to the surface of the water. As soon as I saw it, it just went back to the water." End quote. Unsure of what she had seen, she thought it was a person in diving gear, while Jerry, although not having actually laid eyes on it, suggested that it might have been a dolphin, which Maria disagreed with. She told the Clarion Ledger, quote, "I thought it was a person, but now I think it was an alien. What Parker described was exactly it." End quote. Wow, man. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Just that with this recollection, right, you got to remember, this is an event that happened in 1973, and this is now 2018, where this couple is trying to recall this brief encounter with an unknown craft that was maybe a helicopter, and then a being in the water that was maybe a scuba diver, alien, or dolphin, or anything.
It could have been anything. But yeah, it's like, why? I just wonder why they didn't speak up sooner, and why they had to wait 45 years to come out with this when, I don't know, dude. That's so weird to me.
In my brief research on this subject, being down in the Bible Belt as they are, a lot of things like alien encounters and just the thought of the existence of aliens is just very frowned upon, so a lot of these people kept this close to their chest probably until their parents were long gone.
It could be, but still, it's just, I don't know, something about it just doesn't seem right with me. But anyway, why don't you move on to the next part of the story, man?
Will do. The Blairs were not the only witnesses to come forward decades after the fact. See, told you. Judy Branning, a local Pascagoula woman, also came forward in 2018 to tell her story from the night in question. According to Judy, she was on a double date that night and claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky while stopped at a traffic light just a few miles away from the river. Quote, "It didn't make noise. It had bright, bright lights. It got closer and it was hovering. It was kind of a saucer shape or disc shape with a rounded top. The radio started sounding like it was running through all the stations and the car went dead. We were freaking out." End quote. Then, Judy says that it shot up into the sky at an impossible speed and disappeared. She claims to have been so startled by the event, she was not able to sleep that night.
Wow, man. So what do you think about that second witness?
That's... as far as the craft is concerned, it seems to be a little more detailed than the previous encounter, a little closer. But also at the same time, the thing that doesn't quite sit well with me is their description of the craft, which compared to Calvin's description where it was oval shaped, this is just your typical UFO, a saucer with a rounded top. Just the classic, you drew it as a 5-year-old UFO.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that too. Which, I don't know, maybe from a certain angle, let's say that this craft is real, maybe from a certain angle it would look more oval-shaped, and then from another angle it would look like a UFO that a 5-year-old drew with crayons,
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to the story. Calvin Parker Jr. remained mostly quiet in the decades after the event. In the years that followed, Calvin bounced from job to job, constantly forced to quit and relocate every time word got out that he was that guy, the one from the Pascagoula alien abduction. Unlike Charles, though, Calvin was less sure about what the beings they encountered were. He speculated that they might not have been aliens at all, and they might have been demons. Calvin spent much of his life trying to outrun the spotlight that came with his story. But just months before his death, he told the Clarion Ledger that, in hindsight, maybe it wasn't all bad. Quote, "Under the circumstances now, I'm kind of glad that it did happen, because I got to meet a lot of people I wouldn't have gotten to meet." End quote, he said. Calvin Parker died of kidney cancer on August 24th, 2023, at the age of 68. Though he may be gone from this world for good, his story lives on, preserved in his 2018 book, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, which is available now on Amazon.com for just $30.25 for hardcover, $30.18 for paperback, or $9.99 on Kindle. All right, man, so let's just quickly talk about 3 of the most common theories with this one. So why don't you get started on the first one?
All right. Let's kick this off by starting with the idea that this could have been a real encounter with real aliens. Some proponents of the men's story believe that the totality of the evidence points to the fact that real aliens abducted the 2 men from the pier on the Pascagoula River. The so-called aliens did not resemble the cookie-cutter grays that most alleged abductees talk about, which to some actually lends credibility to their story. Instead, they describe beings that look nothing like anyone else has ever described, with strange, cone-shaped protrusions on their heads. The men were also baited by law enforcement into confessing to each other in a private moment, but appeared to stick to their story even when alone and believing nobody else was listening. Furthermore, the 2 men passed polygraph tests for whatever that's worth. Dr. Alan Hynek, the famous Project Blue Book scientist who was a UFO debunker turned believer, interviewed the 2 men under hypnosis and concluded that the 2 men were not only telling the truth as they believed it, saying that the 2 men, quote, had a very real, frightening experience, end quote. The 2 men both went to their graves, never wavering on their stories.
Wow, man. So do you have anything that you'd like to say about this?
I mean, from my perspective, reading through this, I'm skeptical at first, like most anyone would be when someone just says, "Oh, I was abducted by aliens." But then, reading the details and doing the research, yeah, there's definitely some possible validity to all of this, and at the very least, yeah, it sounds like something happened, or they really believe something happened. Like,
yeah, I think that this, at bare minimum, this suggests that they're not just making shit up. I mean,
yeah.
Purposely making shit up, at least, right? Like, I don't think they're trying to pull one over on everyone by coming forward with this.
Yeah, these guys didn't just come up with this idea to scam everyone while they're fishing, which was the first time they ever hung out together, because this is Calvin's first day on this job, right? So yeah,
first day on the job and you get abducted by aliens. That's a fucking hell of a way of getting introduced to a new job.
Yeah,
I hope whatever new job I have in the near future, I don't get abducted.
I thought you'd want to get abducted.
I'm not too into anal probes. Anyway, the hoax theory. The second theory is the hoax theory. Some people believe that the entire thing was made up by the 2 men in order to gain fame and or money. Although the 2 men achieved fame, one could hardly argue that they benefited much in a monetary sense. Charles Hickson did co-author a book in the early 1980s on his experience, and was more than willing to do interviews with any newspaper reporter or media personality that would listen. However, Calvin Parker, on the other hand, avoided the public spotlight for many years, even going as far as to quit his job and skip town every time his coworkers learned that he was that guy. In the end, though, he did decide to write a book of his own in 2018, a mere 45 years after the incident. So if that was Calvin's motivation, he certainly was playing the long game. If money was part of the objective, the 2 objectively failed. Furthermore, the men being caught on a hidden tape recorder sticking to their story, even when sitting alone in a room together, does not suggest that this was a simple hoax, unless the two were simply just really good method actors or just really bad at monetizing their story. So what do you think about the hoax theory?
I think that all kind of points to what we just came up with on the first one, you know? Yeah.
Right. I don't think that this one is very likely either. I don't think that hoaxers stick to their story and don't break character even when in private. And to be holding on to this hoax for this long and at the same time not really capitalizing on it much except for writing a book about your experience. Like, let's say, for example, I had an experience or believe that I had an experience at bare minimum, and I wanted to write a book about it. I wouldn't really be doing it for money, although that would be a secondary thing. Like, if I had a truly extraordinary experience, I would want to do something that would let the world know about it. So yeah, I don't see this as being likely to be a hoax. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think that this whole thing was a hoax. I think there's something else going on here. Agreed.
The hypnagogic hallucination theory.
I think it's hypnagogic. I'm not sure though.
Hypnagogic hallucination theory. In an article written in the Skeptical Inquirer, written by Joel Nickell, who we've mentioned on the show before, he makes the case that choosing between the case being a hoax or an alien abduction is a false dichotomy. He writes, quote, "In reviewing the case, I thought there might be another possibility. The two men, who might have been drinking before the incident, as Hickson admitted he was after, might have dozed off. Hickson could then have entered a hypnagogic or waking dream state, a trance-like condition between waking and sleeping in which some people experience hallucinations, often with bizarre imagery, including strange beings, aliens, ghosts, etc. This state may be accompanied by what is called sleep paralysis, the body's inability to move due to still being in sleep mode. In fact, Hickson not only reported the bizarre imagery, but also said that the aliens paralyzed him before carrying him aboard the UFO in what sounds like a hypnagogic fantasy. The imagery might have been triggered by Hickson actually sighting something, almost anything, that while he was in the waking dream state appeared to be a UFO. Hickson stated, quote, "I couldn't resist, I just floated, felt no sensation, no pain," end quote. These phenomena, coupled with the paralysis and fantastic imagery, corroborate the diagnosis of a hypnagogic experience. End of excerpt.
Okay, so we definitely need to talk about this one.
Yeah.
So, as the show's designated drinker, how do you feel about this? Because, like, don't get me wrong, I'm sober now for the most part, but I drank a lot back in the day. But what I can say is that I've never hallucinated while I was drunk, you know? So, like, I'm not saying this is impossible, but I think that it might be one of those rare instances where alcohol can and does contribute towards some kind of a hallucination.
I mean, it alters your consciousness, you know, for sure. I've never had anything like that. After reading this and the definition of a hypnagogic hallucination, or, you know, a waking dream state, I've had that a couple of times. Nothing freaky, nothing like alien abductions, but I have fought sleep deprivation on multiple occasions, and a couple of times when you're losing that fight, you know, you feel like you're in the room you're in, but you're definitely imagining things that aren't there, but they kind of seem to be playing out around you. And then you wake up a little bit and you realize, oh, no one was actually here. I wasn't just doing this thing I thought I was doing. You know, at least for me, I've had that a few times in the past. So that does make sense. The possibility of a hypnagogic state, a waking dream state, but not for two people to experience the same thing. Now, right. I know, originally...
That's kind of the turd in the punch bowl of this theory. Yeah. I'm not saying it totally tanks it, but it does pose a problem with the theory.
Well, when Joel Nickell came up with this theory, Calvin Parker still stood by his story that he had passed out. But later, when he wrote his book in 2018, he actually recalled being examined. So
it kind of begs the question is, like, So did he pass out, or does he have a conscious memory of this whole experience?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I don't understand either, because it's a little contradictory.
It is, and as are a lot of things in Unsolved Mysteries, but Calvin Parker also didn't want the attention that Charles wanted on him. So he might have lied about the whole inspection thing and said he passed out and didn't remember any of it, just so
That's
people
true
would leave him alone, right? And that contributes to Joel Nichols' theory here is you do not have two people with the same hallucination, because when he came up with this, Parker had no recollection, or at least very little, of what had gone on.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think. I guess he's basically making the argument that one or both of them were in this trance-like state between waking and dream-like sleep. And okay, another thing that's kind of weird too to me is that Charles claimed that he started drinking after the incident to calm his nerves, but it's kind of like, well, how can we prove that he was sober right before? You can't. You have to take his word for it.
Well, and then according to some of the things I've read, is he later admitted that he was drinking a little bit while they were fishing before.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah, and then afterwards drank more because of the trauma,
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about this shortly. So
right.
Let's just wrap up our story here. So what happened to Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker Jr. on that dilapidated pier on that fateful October evening in 1973? We may never know for certain, but their story is widely considered as the second most famous case of alien abduction, right behind Betty and Barney Hill, which we covered on episode 9, which, by the way, you should definitely go back and listen to if you haven't already. All right, man, are you ready to try and solve this sumbitch once and for all?
Let's go for it. Who's first?
Well, before we even start parsing out our opinions on the matter, I want to go back and I want to read a quote from Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet, which was part of episode 29, The Ariel School, which again, go back and listen to if you haven't already. It was one of those episodes I was really proud of. But anyway, I think it's a really good quote because I think it totally applies to this case. So the quote goes as follows, quote, "That is at bottom the only courage that is demanded of us, to have courage for the most strange, the most singular, and the most inexplicable that we may encounter. That mankind has, in this sense, been cowardly, has done life endless harm. The experiences that are called visions, the whole so-called spirit world, death, all those things that are so closely akin to us, have by daily parrying been so crowded out of life that the senses with which we could have grasped them are atrophied, to say nothing of God," end quote. So first of all, man, what does this quote mean to you?
This means that people try to stymie things that they can't explain. So when you have an experience like an alien abduction, a close encounter, a UFO sighting, a ghostly encounter, anything like that, you try to bring it up and talk about it, but people who are stuck in, let's say, old ways, a lot of time fueled by religion, they just shut all that down because it doesn't jive with their beliefs, And so, especially if you're younger, if you have parents or grandparents who you try to talk to and they say, there's nothing to that, don't tell anyone else because everyone's going to think you're crazy, right? Especially as a little kid, you might take that deep inside and go forward for like the rest of your life and just poo-poo anyone's encounters or stories or anything like that. And you kind of just close out the possibilities of this larger world or universe that can't be seen or explained.
So I had a slightly different interpretation. It's kind of along the same lines as you, but just slightly different. So my interpretation of this is that humans are sort of becoming more and more hyper rational in their ways, in their thinking, maybe relying on science a little too much, and sort of dismissing these extraordinary things that we encounter, that we experience in our lives, And these experiences that we have, like, say, for example, a UFO sighting, a ghost sighting, it's not something that we're supposed to just rationally explain away. The extraordinary events that we experience in our lives like this are just as much a part of our lives as our normal, mundane lives that we live every day. You know, it's not something that we're supposed to rationalize or explain away. And when we start to think in this sort of hyper rational way, life starts to lose its meaning. It starts to lose its, like, the whole reason we're on this earth is not to experience the day-to-day shit. It's to experience all of the extraordinary shit that might pop up in our lives. Not to explain it away necessarily and rationalize it, but to just embrace it and lean into it. Does that make sense? Do you agree or disagree?
Sense. No, I do agree.
So I wouldn't say that it's like about being too rigid because of religion. I think it's more the inverse, where it's like being too rigid because you're embracing science too much and poo-pooing like the more mystical stuff that we may encounter in our lives.
If you have to be able to come up with a rational, logical explanation for every happening, and if you can't, it must not have been real.
Exactly.
Okay.
So anyway, let's get to the actual meat of this mystery. So what are your thoughts on the case?
So I think that these two went aboard an alien spacecraft or something.
So you think that the experience was real?
I do think that the experience was real. Yes. After reading the testimonies and doing the research and everything, despite all of the back and forth and the inconsistencies with Charles's stories, right? Because that was one of the big things for this didn't happen, was all of his inconsistencies, because he gave so many interviews and he wrote a book and he went on TV and all this stuff, right? But his story was never consistent. I think Charles liked the attention, so he was just trying to keep that going. The day after this happened, there was like an army of reporters trying to talk to these two guys to see like what happened. And where Calvin Parker just wanted to forget it all and be left alone, and he had to move town every time someone figured out that he was one of these Pascagoula guys, Charles was all about the attention, even to say that he had been abducted, 2 or 3 more times, like that year or the following year, which I have no idea the details of those, but I think this original one happened for sure. And
for
you have
sure, that's a strong conclusion, man. Why for sure?
Why?
I mean, why are you that confident?
I don't know. I just like the idea.
Going with your gut.
Yeah. Well, after Charles passed away in 2011, years later, Calvin finally wrote a book about what happened. It was like the first time he really opened up to the public about what had happened, right? And he no longer stated that he was unconscious for this whole thing, and he remembers all these details and he puts it all forth, right? And then, of course, right after the book comes out, you have all these other people saying, "Oh, I saw shit the same night in the same area, all these decades ago." And I don't really lean into that a lot because it's forever ago. But Calvin liked it enough that he wrote a second book, that had to do with the new witnesses that came forward after the first book. But that's kind of what pushes me to believe that it did actually happen, was Calvin coming forward all those years later, finally ready to open up about it.
And when he was he knew that he had not much longer to live. So any money or whatever wouldn't have been able to be enjoyed for very long anyway. So, yeah, I mean, on that point, I agree with you that I don't think that let's say that this was hoaxed. Like, let's say that this was hoaxed. Like, why would he wait that long to write the book? That doesn't make sense to me. So I don't think this was a hoax. I'll just come out right and say I don't think they hoaxed this. So, I mean, as for like my own thoughts, I don't know if you have any more, but as for my thoughts on the matter, I guess first of all, man, the idea that these two guys were fishing after work without drinking alcohol, to me, that's laughable. That's absurd. So we know that Charles Hickson had an open liquor bottle in his car and that he started drinking from it after the incident happened. But then, according to the official story, he only started drinking from it after the incident, not before. So
yeah, but there's no way to prove or corroborate that.
Right, but I'm saying, like, do I believe that he was not drinking before the incident? Hell no, I don't, dude. Fishing is boring as fuck. If you're fishing and not drinking, you're basically a Zen master. Because drinking alcohol and fishing, like, that's the only way that I can fucking conceive of ever enjoying fishing, is being wasted.
You know, to come to the defense of people who fish, right? Some people really love to fish, right? Like, everyone's got their addictions. Everyone has that stuff that puts them in their happy place, you know? So I don't doubt that there's people who can enjoy fishing without drinking. But in my experience, it's definitely one of those things that go hand in hand. Whether you love it, hate it, or are completely indifferent about fishing, most people drink while they fish, especially if it's after work, you know?
Yeah, I get it, man. But yeah, I think that they had to have been drinking.
Yeah.
They had to have been. I mean, so that's a non-starter for me.
Yeah.
So we know, like, I believe that they lied, maybe to make themselves sound more credible in the moment. But, you know, like, he should have just came out and clean said, like, yeah, we were drinking, whatever. But it's not like alcohol causes us to hallucinate a fucking UFO landing and bringing us on board. I've never heard of any of our friends or any of our old friends just getting drunk and then suddenly believing they were on a UFO or hallucinating anything like that. So I don't think that it was necessarily the alcohol that caused this incident, but I think that he should have came out and just come clean and been like, yeah, I was drinking, so what, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't think it's a hoax. Come right out and say that. But I don't think it was a real alien abduction either.
What do you think it was?
So I don't really have a way of knowing for sure what happened in this situation. But my best guess is that I think they were hitting the liquor just a little hard. And I think that because fishing is so boring, they both kind of dozed off at the same time. Because, dude, it's fishing. It's boring as fuck. So I think they both entered into one of those hypnagogic dream states, right? So I'm more on the side of Joe Nickel here. And I think that one of them, I'm not sure which one, but I'm leaning towards Charles, dreamt this experience. And then maybe the other one, like Calvin, sort of woke up from this dreamlike state. And he might not have had a memory of the dream, but in this moment, he was really suggestible. And Charles kind of gave him all the details that he needed in this weird ass nightmare that he had. And then he kind of took that on as like this was a fact that this happened. And he kind of integrated it into his own memory and kind of made it a false memory. So he basically, when one of them told the other about this nightmare that they had, this kind of became a false memory in the other's head. Do you see what I'm kind of saying here? Yeah. I'm not saying that this is just my best guess. I have no idea at the end of the day. So, like, am I sure about this? No, I'm not, because this case is, I've never heard of anything like this happening before. I mean, I'm sure it does happen, but it's like, it's rare, but so are stories like this. So that doesn't really mean much, because stories like this are pretty rare. So the real thing that I wanted to say, I know that it's heresy to say this on a podcast that covers events like this and topics like this, but I want to just come out outright and say that I don't really believe in alien abductions or even alien visitations at all. So, like, in the almost 3 years of doing this podcast, you know, like, I think most people who would do a podcast like this would sort of lean into that angle more and kind of go into these rabbit holes and come out the other side of them more of a believer because they're listening to all these people's stories and saying like, wow, a lot of people are having these experiences. There's got to be something to it. But I've found myself becoming more and more jaded the more that I've actually done my own research on all these topics and not just listen to the talking heads on the History Channel and shit like that. And these questionable podcast guests who are talking about their, I don't know, their dumb alien abduction stories and stuff. I don't mean to call them dumb, but to me they are. So I've thought about this a lot, and here's my reasoning for this. So I've actually written some notes here that I want to go over because I've thought about, I had to put this into perspective in order to properly get this across. So we've discovered hundreds of exoplanets already, maybe thousands, I think, right now. And none of them look very promising for life. I mean, some of them are close, but they're not quite in the Goldilocks zone, so to speak. So far, we haven't found anything outside of our own solar system that looks too promising. Maybe a couple that are questionable, but nothing too promising. I'm not saying that there's not life out there somewhere, but if we're talking about advanced alien life, like the kind that can travel through space, I'm not really seeing it yet. So what I want to do is I'm going to go over all of the extremely lucky circumstances that even brought humans to this point. So number one is the Earth has a strong magnetic field that keeps it safe from the solar winds, and it protects the atmosphere from getting blown away. So like Mars, for example, was a lot more Earth-like in the past, but because it had a weaker magnetic field, the solar winds blew away all of the atmosphere, and now it looks like the desert planet that it is today. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So number two is that we have a mixture of both ocean and land. If we were completely an ocean planet, I think it's hard to argue that any life would be able to evolve in such a way that could build spacecraft. Like, we can't build combustion engines underwater, and you can't burn fire underwater. So I don't think that it's likely that like an ocean-dwelling civilization would be able to make the transition to being a space-dwelling one. So the next point I want to make, the moon. So the moon causing the tides to shift back and forth is actually what allowed life to make the leap from oceans to the shores. So certain life started to evolve in this transition zone. As the tides would come in, tides would come out. Life slowly evolved into this transition zone because the moon was spinning around the Earth and pulling the oceans in all different directions. So sometimes that zone would be dry, and then sometimes it would be soaked in ocean water. So this transition zone allowed life to make that leap onto land in the first place. When I say life, I mean animals specifically. So the moon. So it's got to have a moon, right? We also got to talk about the asteroid that hit the Earth 66 million years ago. Life as we know it today would not be where it is if that asteroid didn't kill the dinosaurs. If that asteroid did not hit us, the dinosaurs would still be roaming the Earth, and there would most likely be no intelligent life that would know how to get into space or even know what space was. I think dinosaurs would still be ruling the Earth. If that lucky ass asteroid didn't hit us, the Earth would look like a much different place today. Moving on to that though, moving on to the next point I want to make. If humans were among the first animals to evolve on Earth, I think if we came about in Earth's history earlier, right? We wouldn't have the fossil fuels to pump out of the ground and then even try to launch ourselves into space or create combustion engines, aircraft, cars, machinery, or any of that shit. We wouldn't have it because there would be no fossil fuels. We would be the future Earth's fossil fuels. So also, here's another point I want to make. Just by random ass chance, humans evolved from tree-dwelling apes, right? Which coincidentally, or luckily for us, gave us fingers and thumbs to work with. Because without fingers and thumbs, there'd be no way to even build any of this shit that we have. So, for example, you can argue all you want about how smart the whales and dolphins are, but they can't do shit because they have flippers. Like, even if they somehow exceed humans in intelligence, they're not going to be able to build rocket ships or do any of this shit that would, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They can't build anything. So to add on a little bit to this point, I want to bring up the fact that humans also began to walk upright only when our ancestors' jungle environment began to die off from climate change. Now, this is important because it freed up our hands to use for whatever we want, and we started to walk on two legs. We could see over the tall savanna grass and walk longer distances. And it also enabled us to start building fire, which let us cook meat, and this made our digestion of food more efficient, which then allowed us to start growing larger brain sizes. So we grew our large-sized brains after we had become bipedal. So we were basically dumb apes walking bipedally before we were more intelligent. So next point I want to make, as far as we know, nothing is faster than the speed of light. And, that even assumes that light speed is even possible. Like, light speed travel is possible, which no one really knows if it's possible, but, Anyway, so we assume that aliens would kind of be like us and that they'd even care enough to risk their lives to explore distant worlds just for the sake of their own curiosity. So it's kind of like, why do we assume that they even give a shit about us at all? It might be more probable to me that they'd prefer to just keep to themselves and stay off in their own little bubble. So next, I want to talk about space. And when I say space, I'm not talking about just the three-dimensional sense. I want to also include time. So we're talking about kind of like 4 dimensions. I know time is not technically a 4th dimension, but in this case, it makes sense to include it because humans have only been around for a few 100,000 years. And only in the last few thousand of those years have we really become civilized. And then you also have to take into consideration planets don't last forever. Suns go supernova. Atmospheres blow away. Asteroids hit. Planets collide with each other. So then in order for us to ever even meet aliens, they'd have to meet us on like the exact same timeline that we're on. And we're on a very, very thin sliver of this giant timeline of the universe. So we've got to be lucky enough that both civilizations exist on that same timeline, which I think looks incredibly unlikely. So I think that we could also argue that human civilization is in its latter half, probably. I mean, we're destroying the Earth. We've got nuclear weapons. I mean, it's not looking good for us being around much longer. And I think that's kind of generous to say that we're in the last half. I think maybe we're even closer to the end. So I don't think that's not that life can't evolve somewhere else, like life like us, intelligent life. I think it's very possible it could. But I think that it's either already long gone or it's too far off into the future for us to be able to communicate with them. So, like I said, humans have been around for just a few 100,000 years. Civilization has been around for just a few thousand. And then spacefaring rockets, they've only been around for like less than 70. So, and we have to consider that the universe is 14 billion years old. So I think we have to factor timing into all of this because aliens, they've got to exist on the same timeline that we do. So that's pretty much why I no longer believe that aliens visit Earth, especially when you consider what the aliens look like. These abductees always anthropomorphize these aliens. They all got 2 legs, they got 2 arms, they usually have like 5 fingers, although some, less digits, but they've got fingers, usually a thumb, a head that sits on top of shoulders, feet. They look like weird humans, but nothing about this says that they have to look that way. I think it's more likely that people have this unrealistic image of what aliens are supposed to look like in their heads. And so they either make this up, the people who hoax it, or in their weird dreamlike states and hallucinations, that's what their subconscious believes an alien is supposed to look like, and then that's what their subconscious tells them. Tells them to hallucinate. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining this in a way that's understandable, but
No,
this is kind of where my mind goes when I think about all of this shit. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it that people listening to me go on and on about this might think that I'm just, typical narcissistic human, thinking that we're the center of the universe, but I'm not really saying that. I think the universe might be teeming with life, but I think that it's more than likely the shitty kind. And when I say the shitty kind, I'm talking about like single-celled organisms, all the way up to even like maybe big ass dumb animals. I think that even if we do find another Earth-like exoplanet, it's a massive stretch to just assume that there's anything on it that can build something, let alone build something that can launch itself into outer space and then into other solar systems. I think that is incredibly unlikely. But, the universe is a huge place, and it's happened here. It could theoretically happen again somewhere else, so I'm not discounting that possibility. But the point I want to make in all of this is that I think that to some people, these kind of realizations might sound depressing. But to me, I actually feel really lucky to be alive now, at this time. And I think that for all intents and purposes, Earth might actually be the center of the universe, at least in this current moment. Because we're basically at the pinnacle of life on Earth right now. A lot of people, they think the future looks bleak because we're already at the top. Like, it's all downhill from here. That's why we're already at the top. So enjoy it while we've got it, because there's nowhere else to go but down, right? So yeah, anyway, man, I feel incredibly lucky to be born during this time. I mean, it's a hell of a time to be alive. And I'm tempted to even attribute some of this to God, or maybe we're in some kind of a divine simulation, because like when you factor all of these things in together, like not one of these points is too hard to believe. Like it's not too unusual, but when you stack all of these things together in the correct order, like planet Earth did, it just seems so astronomically impossible that this happened all by chance. So, when we look out at the stars at night and we imagine the possibilities, I think we also need to consider that maybe thinking about it as a possibility is more like white noise disguised as a possibility when it's really not possible. It's kind of like, you ever played like a platform video game, like a Nintendo 64 game, and you see some area that you can't get to and you're trying to figure out how to get there, but it's programmed into the game. There's some sort of barrier that stops you from getting over there. Am I making sense? Am I losing you?
You were making sense right up until the N64.
Well, I'm just saying that
but...
it exists in the world, right? But you're not supposed to get there. There's no way to get there. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Gotcha.
So I'm thinking, like, what if all of these distant worlds, they're just white noise? We're not supposed to get there. We're not supposed to think too much about it. It's just some shit that I thought about recently, and I'm just even more impressed about the world we live in and how lucky we are to have all of these circumstances line up the way they did for humanity to be possible in the first place. Because if one of these things did not happen in the way that it happened at the time that it happened, humans would be an impossibility. We might be still like a dinosaur world until the sun goes supernova.
Wow, man, that was a lot.
So I guess the last thing I want to say about that, though, is that I don't think that my conclusion here contradicts Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet. I think just the fact that we're even here on this planet at all is singular and inexplicable enough, because that shit blows my mind every time I think about it. So I don't need anything else to, think that the world is magical, because just think about all of those circumstances lining up, and How can you not say that's inexplicable?
You really can't. You know. Yeah. No, that was a good deep dive into the infinitesimally small chance that we have to, you know, be here on this planet as humans, as evolved creatures. You know, and I had never thought about the fourth dimension part as far as alien visitation goes, you know, because the difficulty of traveling, you know, light years, you know, it's something we don't know how to do. I always figured that our human understanding of math is just flawed, or there's something missing there, you know, or you take wormholes or something and that's how you travel those great distances.
There could be something there. It's just like we need to do more work.
Yeah,
but for now, I have to be skeptical that it's possible until we can actually prove that it is.
Yeah, but beyond the time it takes to travel the distances and then the technology and everything, you are right, you know, because humans, like you said, like our time in this universe as a developed species is just this tiniest fraction of the age of the universe. And another civilization would have to be here in this universe at the same time we are, you know, advanced, developed, you know, and not just lost to time or have not come around yet, you know.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. I'd never thought of it that way. It's also funny that you bring that up. I was just, you know, flipping through articles on my lunch break, you know, just reading headlines mostly till one catches my eye. And one of them I flipped past, I didn't read, but the headline was some astronomer or mathematician, some smart person, crunched the numbers, and the chance that humans exist on planet Earth, I think he put it at about 1 in 70 trillion, were the odds that we're here.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. What if we are the center of the universe? Not the geographic center, but I mean, like, for all intents and purposes at this point in time, what if we are the center of the universe?
All right, but if we're going to play the numbers game at 1 in 70 trillion, right? We've also figured out that galaxies have like 100 trillion stars in them, and then there's like 100 trillion galaxies. So at 1 in 70 trillion expanded to that kind of number, it doesn't seem so far off that there could be other advanced species out there somewhere. You know?
I think the universe is still in its infancy when you consider how long it's supposed to last. Although I think I did see an article that, you know, there's like a new theory out there that the universe is going to contract back on itself in like way less time than they thought. But I think like the mainstream believes that the universe is going to last like upwards of, God, I can't even remember, like 1 trillion years or something. And we're only 14 billion years into this bitch. Like we might be super early. We could be among the first of these civilizations. Like more stuff might pop up here and there along the way. Like I'm not arguing that. So I'm just saying like how astronomically small of a chance for all of this to happen the way that it did just makes me feel so lucky to be here at all. And so I wanted to tie the Rilke quote back to just how awesome it is to be here on this world. Yeah, I dig it. All right, man. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we sign off here? I don't think so, man. But thanks for sharing that. That was a real deep dive, you know, and a real great way to paint, just how lucky we are to be here alive today, now, at this time, you know, this specific moment in time in this tiny dot in space where everything is perfect, you know, we can do a podcast together 12 time zones away from each other, you know? Yeah. Like, what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. So anyway, man, do you have any apologies, shout outs, or clarifications to go over before we end this?
I was just going to apologize to our listeners for, taking so long to do, an episode, making them wait all this time for this greatness. But hey, sometimes the wait pays off. I hope everyone gets to hear your year-long dive down the rabbit hole. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also do want to apologize again about the whole car description thing, because once again, if you don't care about cars, you're not going to care. But if you do care about cars, you're going to notice I said at the very end there that a 69 GTO looks like a 69 Charger, and you're going to think I'm fucking nuts because if you know anything about cars, they look similar in the fact that they have 2 doors and 4 tires.
Yeah.
It's about it. But those are my apologies to the listeners.
Well, thank you for that. And apology accepted. So I've got 2 shout outs today. So first, I'd like to give a shout out to Hulk Hogan because he passed away of a massive heart attack recently. And I'd like to just thank him for all the good times and even the bad times. He taught me what it means to be a real American. But over the years, I've come to realize that childhood is being a Hulkamaniac. But growing up means becoming more of a Macho Man Randy Savage macho maniac. He was truly the cream of the crop. So next, on a more somber note, I'd like to give a shout out to our producer, Davis, who unfortunately decided to leave this world for good earlier this year. I cried my eyeballs out when I heard the news, that he did what he did, but I'm sure that he had his reasons. So with that being said, though, the show is back up, and I think that he would have wanted us to get back up after getting knocked down like this, and then to try with what's left of our lives to continue fighting for the truth. So everyone, pour some of your 40 out for Davis. Gone, but not forgotten.
Rest in peace, Davis. You will always be remembered.
Well, he's not dead. He just left in a time machine.
Oh.
All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether. And through our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
Macho Man ever cried?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Uh-huh. It's okay for macho men to show every emotion available right there, because I've cried 1,000 times, I'm gonna cry some more. But I've soared with the eagles, and I've slithered with the snakes, and I've been everywhere in between, and I'm gonna tell you something right now. There's one guarantee in life, and that there are no guarantees, yeah. And understand this. Yeah. Nobody likes a quitter. Nobody said life was easy, so if you get knocked down, take the standing 8 count, get back up, and fight again. And you're a macho maniac. Dig it.